Good morning. Our next speaker is Leah Wasser. The title of the session is Friends Don't Let Friends Package Alone.
Thank you so much. Wow, tech support here is incredible. So I'm here to talk to you about why you should never let your friends package alone. Raise your hand if you've ever had some points of confusion around packaging. Anyone? Everyone? Now, raise your hand if you've ever found help from a friend or a colleague that knew something technical that you were struggling with. All right. So, I'm Leah. I created an organization, a nonprofit organization called pyOpenSci, to empower scientists to tackle some of the world's greatest challenges by creating better software and they're making their science more open and collaborative. We have a peer review program of software. We also do education and training and provide online resources around packaging and other thorny pain points in a scientist's journey. I'm an educator. I've been teaching for a very long time data science to scientists. I love translating the most challenging topics to beginners. That is my favorite thing, watching people be empowered. I am also an expert in imposter syndrome. So, who has imposter syndrome? So, I have a background, I have a degree in arts, in design. And then I ended up in science, and I cried when I read my first scientific paper because most of the words I didn't know. And now I'm up here in PyCon at a tech conference. I don't understand how I got here, but I am here on this stage. It's humbling. I'm also a foster fail, or mom to a foster fail. So this is my dog, Juno. She really likes sticks. I tried to foster her, but then I couldn't let go. She's my baby. That was a fail, but a win for me. So I want to tell you about my maintainer journey. A few years ago, I became a maintainer by mistake of an open source package called Stravalib. The author of the package, after 10 years, he needed to step down, and neither of us wanted Stravalib to become the sad orphan Python package that no one could use anymore. So my job became to look at the infrastructure, rebuild the maintainer team, and revive Stravalib. I noticed very quickly that the infrastructure for Stravalib was really dated. There was no CI when people submitted PRs to run tests. The docs hadn't been rebuilt in several years. And the packaging infrastructure, the whole release and publication to PyPy workflow was manual. You needed to have a token and do everything at the command line. And I wanted our shiny new maintainer team to be set up for success in reviving Stravalib. So I'm not a packaging expert. I had made some packages before. I felt dangerous because I kind of copied a package infrastructure that I saw on GitHub that I used a lot and kind of made things work. I fumbled around with it. So I leaned into people that knew more than I knew about packaging and said, hey, what are the best practices here for packaging? How do I do this? How do I enable success in this maintainer team? Wow. What I was hit with was so many options and words and things I didn't know a lot about. Too many options and not enough biscuits. Not enough early wins where I could just get something done, get the job done that I was trying to do as a maintainer. So I decided to try to learn Setup Tools SCM. All my friends were using it. Stravalib already had Setup Tools as its build tool. And I started to try to figure out how to use it. I looked at the docs, and there was just some gaps. The docs weren't for me. The docs had steps that were there that I kind of understood, but then there was some information missing in between where I was like, there's some step that I don't understand in this process, in these docs. So I went to Google. This was before ChatGPT was a thing. Not that I think actually ChatGPT could help me with this problem, but I went to Google, I searched, and I found some blog posts. Yay. But Unfortunately, those were all a couple of years old. Maybe they got me halfway, but they didn't get me to that win of getting things set up successfully. So in the end, I figured it out, and I figured it out because of my friends, because I asked a lot of questions and people explained it to me. But from a maintainer's perspective, I just wanted to create a package. I just wanted to build that infrastructure. I didn't want to become a packaging expert. And from a maintainer's perspective, I wish that I had one way to do things. This is a pure Python package. Just give me that win. Now, from an educator's perspective, TMO, too many options, is a problem because we're talking about cognitive overload. Have you ever gone to a grocery store when you're really hungry and you want dinner and you see all of this food and you're like, either you're going to buy everything, buy a whole bunch of candy, or you leave the store and order a pizza because you have no idea how to just make that decision. This is too many options. Your brain has too much information. So this was a problem, and I also wish that there were some early wins for people like me that felt newer to packaging, that wanted that early success. That's so important for beginners. So you might be wondering, I was wondering, what do scientists think? So that was my maintainer cap. Are scientists having the same challenges? And the answer is they are. Every time I go to a meeting, I ask two questions. One, I ask, what are your go-to packaging tools? Now, if you look really hard, you're going to see some tools that are not packaging tools in this word cloud, but this is about 76 people. And you'll notice people are using setup tools and pip and Conda and Sphinx. And this really aligns well with a lot of the survey data we've seen in the ecosystem, but we're also seeing that they use end-to-end workflow tools like Poetry, and Hatch is becoming more and more popular. And I'm going to talk about these end-to-end tools in just a little bit. I also asked them, what are your biggest packaging pain points? Again, TMO, too many options. This always comes up. And more specifically, people want clarity. They say, I wish that there was a preferred way. I wish where I could figure out where to get more information to understand what are the best practices. How do we get this job done? So the takeaways. One, wherever we can avoid too many options, TMO, let's try to do that for our users. And then two, early wins are really important. We want people to have that first step into our Python ecosystem, into our packaging ecosystem, to be empowering, to them to feel like they can be successful. And then three, I wish documentation was just a little bit more beginner-friendly. I wish that people could put on that beginner cap that we all experience when we do something new and help people get started and help them get to those early wins. Now, where does community fit into all of this? You can see this is the URL to our Python packaging guide. Well, again, I wouldn't be here where I am today on this stage without community and without friends. I would not have had my first successful experience without friends. I knew that if we were going to create a packaging guide and another set of resources, that we needed to have a nice overview of the ecosystem to help people navigate and kind of find their way through this a little bit thorny, prickly path. I knew that we needed some sort of opinionated tutorial that would help people get that first win, a beginning to end path to create your first pure Python package. It's doable. We can do this. And then finally, it really needed to be accurate, it needed to be accessible, and it needed to be beginner friendly. All of these things needed to be characteristics of our guidebook. I also knew, putting my educator cap on, that fundamentals need to come first. Not tools, not opinions, the basic elements of a Python package. How can we help people understand what that is? What does that look like? I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. So to make sure our guide was beginner friendly and accurate. We're talking about technical stuff, a big ecosystem of tools, an ecosystem of amazing tools. Like, there are some great tools out there. How do we help people navigate their way through it? I knew we needed community. So we set up a review process that had multiple pieces. So when we went to write, for example, a page on Conda Forge and publishing to Conda Forge, we talked to the Conda Forge maintainers first. And we developed a draft of the content that was vetted by the people working on those tools. Then we opened things up to a broader community review, where sometimes we had hundreds of comments on a page and multiple rounds of review. Sometimes pages went through the review more quickly, but the input from lots of people across the ecosystem, building tools, using tools, was important. And then finally, we wanted to make sure we had that beginner voice in the guidebook. This meant that beginners needed to read through, test the content, and review it as well. So we held sprints and what we call bug bashes, where someone could test out a tutorial, give us some feedback, tell us what works, tell us where you got stuck. If you're on Windows or Mac or Linux, we want to know, and we want you to help, and we want to improve these tutorials so the next person doesn't run into that same challenge. This is a living guidebook, which means that we're going to update it over time. It's not going to be another blog post, which are great, but if they're a few years old, that can be a pain point for a beginner too, so we're going to keep it up to date over time. Today, we've had over 50 people contribute to our packaging guide. If you are interested, actually, at PyCon, we're going to be sprinting on Monday only, and you could come and test drive a tutorial or help us add content or fill in some missing gaps. I'd love to see you there. Now, one of the challenges with review is another version of TMO. This time, instead of too many options, we're talking about too many opinions. Now, friends, I have opinions. We all have opinions. Opinions are great. They're fine. But when we're talking about technical things and we start arguing with each other about the best way to do things or the best tool for the job, we're really pushing a lot of people away. Imagine when you don't have a deep technical understanding of something and you see people in a review or in person starting to argue and things get a little heated and things get a little tense. A beginner does not feel like, or they won't feel like they belong in that situation. They're going to be pushed away. But the thing is, because packaging is so tricky and so technical and so hard for so many people, those beginners that we're pushing away are exactly the people that need to be at the table. So I needed to be at the table. We all need to be at the table, and we need to support people to ensure that, again, their first step into our packaging ecosystem is a great one, because again, we can do this. We have solved part of this problem. So, opinions and packaging, they are great. Keep them, friends, keep your opinions. We love opinions, but let's focus on people. Let's focus on people having a good experience in our ecosystem and them sticking around because of that ecosystem rather than leaving because they had a frustrating experience. So, I mentioned fundamentals. Fundamentals first. So what does that mean? What does that look like? I'm going to say something that might be controversial, but there is a way to create a pure Python package right now, and I can tell you how to do it in 4 steps. The first step involves creating a package directory structure. Some folders and some files and things need to be in a particular order, a particular structure, but that's the first step. The second step is we're going to add some code, right? We need some code. Probably it has to be in portable code, so functions or classes or something that can run. We add that to the file structure. Third, we need some metadata. We need to know the package name, we need to know the package version, and there's some other things too. And all of that's going to be stored in a PyProject TOML file because that is the modern preference for creating a pure Python package for metadata storage. And we can teach people about that file too. Finally, you have just created your package. You might not know it yet, but you have. Pip install in an editable mode. You have just created your first Python package. I just explained that. I don't know how long it took. Let's say it took a minute. I just explained how to create a Python package. Notice that we're not talking about Git and GitHub and version control. We're not talking about testing and typing or how do we build our docs. Not yet, anyways. We're just talking about how do we create our first Python package. Those are the steps. Now we could expand on this and start thinking about build files and these words like sdist and wheel. I was so confused by those words when I first saw them. I was like, what is a wheel? I have like a bunch of bicycles in my garage. Like, is that what we're talking about? I have a car, I have a wheel. Well, it turns out I have a secret to tell all of you today, and that is that a wheel is a zip file in disguise. If you take the WHL extension on that file, on that distribution file, and you change it to ZIP, you can open that up and look at what's in it. It's not a big secret or mystery. And yes, wheels have a lot more power than just being a zip file if you're dealing with more complex packages and builds across different types of architecture. There's a lot more to that story. But do beginners need to know that? Not yet. We still want them to get to that success, which probably means for them publishing the PyPy. Yes, let's get them there first. And then to Conda Forge, and we can get them there too. There's great documentation on that process, especially for pure Python. So the takeaways here. If you're trying to create great documentation, moderate conversations, keep people on the same page, keep them focused on the content and the users, focus on the users over the tools. And then finally, whenever you can, break things down to their absolute fundamentals first. Now, finally, you might be wondering, well, I talked about this opinionated workflow. How do we pick a tool? How do you pick a tool? How do we figure out what tool might be best for you to create a Python package? Let's go back to the fundamentals, and you can decide what path is right for you. There are two types of tools, generally, if you think about it from a big picture. The first are these end-to-end workflow tools. This is like that Leatherman or that Swiss Army knife that has a little screwdriver and maybe a little file and maybe a little saw or whatever your multi-tool has on it. And you can stick it in your pocket and you can take it with you. And then we've got individual tools. So that is a heavier toolbox, and it probably has a hammer and a screwdriver and different things. And the important piece is that you need to remember that if you use that hammer on a screw, it's not going to work. So you have to kind of remember that. So if I compare this to packaging, if I'm using a tool like Hatch, which is an end-to-end workflow tool, I can use Hatch init new and create that directory structure. I can use Hatch build to build that sdist and wheel to create my build files, and I can use Hatch publish to publish to PyPy. Nice, consistent API, nice, consistent interface. But maybe I want to use individual tools. So in that case, I might be using a cookie cutter or a template. I might be creating my directory structure in Bash. Maybe I'm using the PyPA build tool to build my package distributions. And I'm going to probably use Twine to upload and publish to PyPy. In my experience, beginners have an easier time learning end-to-end tools because it's just easier to remember the commands. You're installing one thing, and you're ready to go. We're talking about lower cognitive load, again, making things simpler for users. Now, we ended up choosing Hatch, not because it's the absolute best tool ever. There are other great tools out there, but I like that the maintainer was super responsive. When I'm creating online lessons, I really appreciate being able to sanity check things to make sure that we're teaching them correctly or troubleshoot if someone runs into a bug on a particular operating system. I found it to be user-friendly. It adheres to the Python standards around packaging, which I really appreciate. It keeps up to date. And then finally, and most importantly for me, putting my maintainer cap back on, is it doesn't lock you in. So we can use parts of Hatch if we want, but our maintainer team doesn't necessarily need to switch to new environment management tools if they don't want to. That was really important for them. And also, if we need to update our lessons in a couple of years, we can do that as it evolves. It's not going to be a huge effort because of the way Hatch runs. If you don't believe me that this works, a couple of weeks ago, we had our first workshop, Create Your First Python Package, and we had 28 people attend online, and we had 28 people create either their first or one of their first Python packages, pure Python, and they were successful. And they had a good experience, and they left feeling like they belong. And it was awesome. All of these tutorials are also online. So now some of you might be thinking, I don't want an opinionated way because the beauty of Python is there are so many options, and that's great too. So we're trying to help people also navigate the ecosystem by breaking things down. You might want to use Flip because it's a very lightweight, easy to use tool. It's going to build your package. It's going to help you publish your package, and that might be all you need. But if you want something that has more features, you might think about Hatch, PDM, or Poetry, because they will support environments and some dependency management. And I think Hatch is missing a green X right there because it's moving towards dependency management too. All of these types of graphics are in our guidebook, and they really support people that want to navigate the sea of options because they like options, and they do have opinions, and that's important too. So, the takeaways from today. 1, when we're talking about Python's most thorny technical topics, people can help. People can help review. People can help provide input. People can support each other in having those early wins, in being successful, in helping each other learn. We can't do all of this by ourselves. We need friends. 2, whenever you can, think about creating early wins for your users. That might be someone creating their first Python package. That might be just understanding what a wheel file is and just unzipping it and showing someone so it's less mysterious. Whatever that looks like for you in your documentation, create those early wins. 3, focus on fundamentals first. By breaking things down to those basic concepts that people can understand and digest, you're going to empower someone to get further in their Python packaging or whatever technical journey they're on more quickly. And they're going to feel like they belong and they can do this. Finally, whether it is opinions or options, let's try to push the options and opinions aside when we're trying to empower people to be successful. Let's try to focus. Let's try to give them those early wins. Let's try to hold our opinions and value them, but empower others to do more and to be involved in these thorny technical conversations. So what's next for us, for pyOpenSci, for our packaging work, for the work that I've been doing for the past couple of years? 1, we're going to be adding some more advanced packaging topics to our guidebook, and if anyone is interested in being involved, I welcome you to join us. We're going to be adding more content around collaborative Git and GitHub, because whether we like it or not, GitHub can be really tricky to learn, and collaborative Git can be very scary and daunting. And you can, again, check out our guidebook to kind of keep tabs on what we're up to. Ways that you can get involved with us: you can review our guidebook. We have a peer review process. You can sign up. You can become an editor. You can become a reviewer. You can submit a package to be reviewed for us. We have a partnership with the Journal of Open Source Software as well. We also have training events that we're going to be running, and I'm going to talk about one we're doing in the fall in just a moment. Or you can just follow us and keep tabs on what we're doing. And if you're new to packaging, I encourage you to get involved with pyOpenSci. We're here to help. We have tutorials. We want to build more resources. If you have input on like, hey, I'm really getting stuck in this area, we want to hear about it. So I'm Leah. I created pyOpenSci because I want to empower scientists to create better software. I want to empower scientists to make their work more open, more collaborative, and more reproducible so that they can solve the world's greatest challenges. There's my contact information if you want to reach out to me. I'm Leah Wasser on GitHub. We are holding a Open Science, Open Source Fall Festival totally online in the fall. So save the date. It's going to be all about learning and supporting each other in these technical journeys. So we hope that you're able to join us. Special thanks to Carol for supporting me being up on the stage today. I was very nervous. And thank you all for being here and giving me the time to talk about translating challenging topics to beginners. And I hope that this empowers other people to navigate the Python packaging ecosystem and to feel like they belong in this community the way I feel like I belong right now talking to you. Thank you, everyone. Questions? I think we have time for a few questions.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for your presentation. So I have a question. You said too many options. There already is a packaging guide under packaging.python.org. Isn't it just creating another option for people coming into? And the second element to it, do you think there's anything special for scientific opposed to just people new to the Python, not necessarily into the scientific part of it?
Yeah, those are great questions. So one, some great resources. I'm glad you asked that question. And there is the PyPA's packaging content, which is great. The challenge with that content is that for a beginner, there's options. So for example, there's lots of build backends to choose from, and there's decisions that people make, that people have to make. If you're a beginner, the challenge there is that, what if you make the wrong decision? And for a beginner, that can be really overwhelming and challenging. So we actually are talking with those folks as well, but it's important to provide that opinionated way. So what our guidebook really does is provide that beginning to end. It's not a new way to do things. We're just picking the tools that users use in our tutorials. And then the second question about the scientific ecosystem, the big challenge there is really the non-pure Python space, where you're trying to have additional compilation steps and other things. So I think that that is the big difference. And a tool that supports multiple build backends, when I was thinking about tools, PDM and now Hatch were really the only options that allowed that. Like, we could talk about the weeds of poetry and that support, but that really was part of the decision as well. I just didn't want to talk about all those details in this talk. Those are great questions.
So first, I wanted to really thank you as a fellow educator that's currently working in the same area. This is amazingly useful for me. But also, so you mentioned that this is a hard topic, and this is a hard topic because there was some documentation missing, and you're trying to cover that gap. But what do you think are the difficulties that are intrinsic from the ecosystem and that the ecosystem could improve on to make this easier and more approachable and easier to teach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, honestly, the first thing that keeps slapping me in the face in terms of the difficulties are just the decisions and decision paralysis. And that comes back to, again, like, imagine yourself in the grocery store when you're really hungry. It's really hard to make a decision because your brain is like hungry, and it can't. So if you're someone trying to navigate the ecosystem, and scientists said this to me too, it's like there's so many options and I want to pick one, but I don't know, is one preferred over the other? And so those questions get in people's way of being successful. So I really do think right now, at least for pure Python packaging, a lot of this is just, and not just, but is a documentation problem, because we have some good solutions out there and we have maintainers that are creating tools that care. So that's my perspective. I know there's a lot more complexity than what I presented here, but I do think we can empower people right now with those wins, and people will be successful. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.